Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast. We're back again. It's still May. They say April showers bring May flowers. For me, April showers have brought May showers. So just more showers. I am Illeagle 86, one of your hosts, and I am joined by my two fantastic friends, Nerdbomber and Techtic. Say what's up, guys.
What's up?
Hey, what's up?
Remember that old commercial from we're dating ourselves, but it was like the late 90s, right?
Yeah,
Man,
was that Budweiser? Bud Light? One of those?
It was also
one
in
of the
the
buds.
Scary Movie.
Yeah, it was like a cultural touchstone. Like anyone who was alive in the late 90s, if you say "what's up" to them in that way, they're going to know what you're talking about. Commercials are amazing, but that's not why we're here. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about some other stuff. We are going to talk a little bit about a very impressive Unreal 5 demo that came out last week. We're going to be talking about some news in the CW DC universe, specifically associated with Batwoman. And of course, we're going to be talking about this extended gameplay demo of Ghost of Tsushima, which we actually talked about. I think we might have talked about it a couple times on the podcast. I know at least once, and it's a pretty cool looking game, so we're going to dive into that. But first, let's start at the start with this Unreal Engine demo. And shout out to our Patreon producer, Ben Checkness. He was hitting us up on Twitter last week to talk to us about this. This video, so essentially what we have here is Epic is showing off their Unreal Engine 5, specifically their nanite technology, and also Lumen, which is really responsible for lighting. I don't know a whole lot about graphics, but what I do know is that this was on PS5 hardware, and it basically showed a very short demo of the comments compared it a little bit to Uncharted in the sense that it's this girl, more like Tomb Raider is probably what you would think actually, where this girl is kind of walking around these ruins, seeing a lot of very fancy, caves and cliffs and eventually like ancient architecture and statues and stuff. And the whole time she's walking around, it's obviously gorgeous. So I just, first thoughts from you guys, watching this, was your mind blown by this? Were you impressed by it, or were you just kind of meh about it?
So first off, if you haven't seen the video, you absolutely need to watch it. For me, when I was watching it, the difference between what we currently have and this didn't hit me until a certain point, and then it just blew my mind. And that point in the video was when the character was walking through the cave, all of a sudden a hole breaks through the ceiling, and the transition from diffused light to full light was virtually seamless, and that absolutely blew me away. And then the second one that I thought was mind-blowing was after they emerge from the cave, there's this kind of glowing orb in the distance, and the relative reflectivity of the rays from that orb to your perception as you're running towards it, just absolutely seamless. It looked like how I would live that kind of lighting. So kudos to the team. I think they did a really, really good job there.
I honestly, for me, the graphics, they look great. Don't get me wrong. Like, especially when I watched the video back in 4K instead of the live stream, which was kind of choppy on my end. Watching it in 4K, it looked phenomenal. This looked like a game that I would want to play. But the thing that really impressed me the most was at some point in the presentation, or maybe it was in an interview on a website, they said that basically with Unreal Engine 5, it will basically be the end of loading screens, and that the way that the engine is built is that you could basically build an entire world and you can walk through a door, and in some games, like normally that would be a loading screen because that would be your portal to the next level. But with Unreal Engine 5 and the capabilities of the hardware that the games would run on, you wouldn't have a loading screen. So you could literally have a game with no loading screen whatsoever. And to me, like graphical capabilities, obviously, like we're getting to a point now, in my opinion, where games are looking better and better. And I don't know how much better games can look where I could appreciate it, at least not without my glasses. But the loading screen thing, that will really impact the way that I'm immersed in a game, because I think we talked about this back when we talked about Spider-Man. One of the things PS5 that really, it stopped me from using fast travel at all was because you had that loading screen where he was sitting on the subway. And while that was funny the first couple times, eventually like it kind of broke the immersion. So I would rather just web swing from end to end of the city. And I think loading screens are like, if those go away, that's going to be the pivotal moment and the pivotal thing that we'll see as a benefit from this next generation. Because,
right.
I mean, at this point, now computers too, I feel like they can run games in 4K. It's not like this super groundbreaking thing, but the loading screen aspect of Unreal Engine 5 was the thing that blew my mind the most. I will say though, disappointed that we didn't get a chance to like have this as a full fleshed out game because it looked really interesting. Like you said, it looked kind of Tomb Raidery. I really liked it. I liked the vibe.
I'm excited to become a grandfather one day, simply because can you imagine you're sitting there looking at your grandchild saying, back in my day, we had these things called loading screens. You would have no idea how terrible.
Dude, back in our day, we were playing stuff like Duck Hunt and like playing DOS games.
That's true.
Right. I mean, the loading screens thing is a big deal. And it's worth noting that it seems like Unreal Engine 5 is basically a harbinger of doom for HDDs and kind of further proof that if you want to have a gaming PC or if you want to have a good console, it's going to need a solid state drive because all of that no loading screens business is driven by the fact that you have a solid state drive that the engine can take advantage of. For me, the thing about it, so the cool thing about this demo is that, they have a character walking around and they're quote unquote playing a game, but they'll kind of pause the action and they'll like Techtic mentioned this hole opening up in this cave and light shining in. And they were kind of showing how, okay, if we change the angle of the sun and the light shines in certain places, you can see how quickly, this Lumen engine reacts to that and how quickly light sources can move and everything looks super seamless and photorealistic. And we're talking about, film quality assets here, like these statues they're talking about in this kind of ancient ruins scenario. Like they looked like if you were watching a movie. I mean, in terms of environments, we're approaching photorealism. And we have been for a while, but I think we're closer now than we've ever been. So that's super cool, obviously. To me, one of my takeaways is they spent a lot of time and a lot of effort creating this demo and showing these beautiful cliffside scenes and Techtic, you mentioned the ending with the glowing orb far away in the canyon and everything. And it was all beautiful. And they showed these fluid animations that would be very natural. This girl putting her hand on a door when she walked through it, which is, it's kind of hard. They described how it's hard to replicate. And the whole time they're talking about, using numbers like billions and trillions of triangles and polygons that are used to render these things. And it's all super impressive. And my question is, why don't you put some of that processing power towards the character model? Because they had this fantastically rendered environment that was just gorgeous to look at. And then they had this girl who, I'm sorry, she was kind of a cartoon. If that's where the work is needed in terms of graphical impressiveness, because I agree that loading screens are probably going to be the next big thing that
the Unreal Engine
experience.
The Unreal Engine is the environment, right? That's what they were touting. It wasn't the character, and the sidebar to that is your perception could easily kind of, I guess, leapfrog that concern, right? If you're
in a
looking through the eyes of the character, well, who cares what they're rendered as?
And I think a lot of that depends on like the art style of the game, because I know like obviously you play some games, like I would say probably Assassin's Creed tries to get really realistic with their character models, but then you play other games like Borderlands and they really don't. Like it's super cartoony. So I wonder if it really just comes down to what kind of character assets that the game developer will provide to the game engine. And I mean,
but that's like my point is this was a mix. It was the environment was super photorealistic, and it was like take Uncharted, which I already mentioned for an example. It was like their character models are also very photorealistic, and it all fits and it all meshes. And this was, they had this beautiful environment, and then they just kind of pasted a cartoon character in there that didn't belong. And I know it's a demo. I know that's not the final product what they're going for, but it's just I thought it was an interesting choice. I guess. I don't know.
I mean, so for me, I think I've talked about this before. I actually prefer, I like the worlds to be super realistic and beautiful, but the characters themselves, if they get too humanoid, they kind of freak me out a little bit. So I wonder if maybe that was
Uncanny
just
Valley.
Why. Yeah.
Yeah. There's Uncanny Valley to be contended with. And yeah, maybe that is why, maybe, but my point is that might be, in terms of graphics, where the next big leap will come. We've seen that we can render environments in a way that you're practically there. I mean, we for that matter, we talked about Spider-Man already. We kind of saw that in Spider-Man. You had New York City in its entirety accurately mapped out, and you could go to the Empire State Building, look at it, and go, wow, it's the Empire State Building. And granted, Spider-Man also isn't really about character models, but like that might be the next big thing is, take, for example, Call of Duty, I think it was Advanced Warfare, they put Kevin Spacey in the game. And however you might feel about Kevin Spacey, like, it's very impressive to be able to look and say, that's Kevin Spacey. But let's be honest, it didn't look like Kevin Spacey. And, we've seen leaps there. They put Norman Reedus in, what's this weird game?
Death Stranding with the baby.
Death Stranding. And it looks like Norman Reedus, but not quite, right? Like I think...
It's all in the eyes.
If you're asking...
Honestly, it's all in the eyes.
It is. It is, and that you're exactly right about that. But that's my point, is that, okay, we can render a cliff, we can render the Grand Canyon and it looks exactly correct. Like, for all intents and purposes, they could render the Grand Canyon with the Unreal Engine 5 and I would see the Grand Canyon. But I want them to render, I don't know, Nicolas Cage, and I want to see him rendered by that engine looking the way Nicolas Cage looks, and like, that's going to be impressive. I don't know how far off that is, but yeah, that's a weird example I chose. But that's kind of my point. I mean, I watched this demo and I was blown away by a lot of it. The way we didn't even talk about the Chaos Engine either. The Chaos Engine being this thing that they use to, I think the example they used was like a swarm of bats or like bugs or something, where you have these, swarms of certain things that they interact in a group, but they can also interact independently of each other. And again, for the purposes of immersion, it's fantastic. So I guess when I see that, I'm wondering what the next step is. And the lowest hanging fruit to me is the character model. But, I'm curious to see. It's worth noting too that this was demoed on a PS5. It's already, when I was looking up the article to talk about this tonight, I saw other articles saying, don't worry, this is also like, you can play this on a computer with a certain, if you have a certain GPU, you'll get the same thing. So it's not a PS5 exclusive thing. It's just, that's what they're demoing it on, because obviously the PS5 is coming. But I don't know. It changed my perception of whether or not I would buy a PS5 around release time. And to be fair, it didn't change it that much, but it definitely swung the needle a little bit more in the positive direction.
I think for me in general, this just kind of makes me excited about the future of games, because, I mean, we've seen what a bad game engine can do to a game. And I think anybody who's played some of the more recent BioWare games, Frostbite, I believe that was a BioWare. Like, isn't Frostbite engine, isn't that an EA one? I know it was a very bad experience. Any game that I've played with Frostbite, it's just been kind of clanky and janky. And I think Unreal 5, I know they even commented several times during the demo that it would be very easy for a beginner or a small team to make use of all of these special effects. And right. I think that might make indie games a little bit better quality. Not that indie games aren't already good quality, but like it paves the way for a bright future for future games. And even small teams can make use of Unreal Engine 5. And I think they had the assets. They said there would be assets available for people to use.
Right. Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, because this was a point I wanted to mention. So, yeah, the Unreal Engine is free to use. And Unreal Engine 4, I think all the Unreal Engines have been free to use. But they do have a royalty policy, which before this, they would begin collecting a 5% royalty fee after $3,000 of gross revenue in a quarter for a game. Now, they won't take any royalties on the first $1 million of revenue. So that's a significant...
That's a big chunk of change.
Increase in that floor. And yeah, and then, like you said, you could see a lot more viability of indie studios, using this engine to create beautiful games. So it's good news for gamers, without a doubt. I mean, we didn't even mention they did a kind of a demo on 360 degree surround sound, which, watching it on a laptop, I didn't really get the full experience of that, I feel like. But, they've been working on that a lot too. So it signals... I think a pretty significant step forward. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, because, and we talked about this last week when we were talking about a bunch of the demos that we saw at the Xbox event, is like, obviously Epic wants to put their best foot forward with this, and they want to show the best possible thing. The question is, what do we, the end users, actually get? How fine-tuned was this demo they showed? How likely is it to break? I mean, talk about the physics. Like, look at, I want to say Bethesda's the worst one for this, where you can go on Reddit, r/game physics, and just see how easy it can be to break certain games, break the physics engines of certain games. And I wonder if there would be certain things that you could do in this demo they showed that would just break everything. So it's, part of me wants to look behind the curtain, part of me doesn't. I'm pretty psyched about how it looked, but I'm also kind of a wait and see guy on a lot of this stuff. Before we move on, Techtic, you've been relatively quiet. Any closing thoughts?
No, I'm good with that.
All right. Unreal Engine 5 demo. Check it out. It's pretty cool. Promises a lot in terms of triangles. I was laughing for a lot of the video just because of how much they'd walk through a cave and be like, okay, there's over a billion triangles in this render right here. And I was like, number means nothing to me. I mean, obviously the higher the better, but
it was impressive when they did show the actual triangles instead of like the fully rendered image. And it basically just looked like noise because there were so many triangles. It like was not even fathomable. They were super small. It basically looked like a bunch of dots on the screen, but each dot was a triangle.
Well, yeah, they did say
like triangles.
They did say triangles. There can be some triangles that are just 1 pixel, wide or whatever the dimension is. So yeah, I mean, obviously we're breaking ground here. It's just, to me, it's an interesting metric. I get why it's the metric, but like they're talking about triangles. I'm looking at a beautifully rendered cave and I'm like, I don't see any triangles. But I guess that's the point. So yeah, check out this video if you haven't already. It's very impressive stuff. But now we are going to talk a little bit more about Batwoman. So you guys have not watched this Batwoman show. I have not either. This is a CW series, just announced that the title role for season 2 will be recast. And we kind of just want to talk about this simply in the sense of, has this been done, first of all? And if you're doing it, how do you do it? Not even just in the context of Batwoman specifically, but, how do you recast your main role? And for TV, I have no examples, but I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on this move? Because Ruby Rose, the lead in Batwoman, has essentially announced this. I believe due to like physical concerns, she had some injuries or something. You might know better than me.
So from what I was seeing, so season 1, I believe, just actually ended. I think the season 1 finale of Batwoman aired either this week or last week, and it was renewed for season 2. That was announced, but today Ruby Rose did say that she was going to step away. And I know she did have like a really bad injury doing stunts for the show where I think she herniated a couple discs and was super close to being paralyzed or something, though she's saying that's not the reason why she is stepping away. She just decided to step away. So I've seen a few roles recast in television, albeit not many. I'm sure there's probably a lot of like bit roles or supporting actors that get replaced in a lot of television shows, but I've never seen like a main character get replaced. I think 2 of the only times that I've seen this happen was once in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, where Greg, the character Greg, was recast. He was, I don't remember the actors, but he was originally the guy from Frozen, and then it got replaced by the guy from Pitch Perfect, and like they kind of looked alike, but he was one of the main love interests for the main character in the show, and it was extremely jarring. And they tried to play it off as if like, because part of the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, the shtick was that she had a mental illness, so that how she progressed with her mental illness changed the way she perceived the character in the show. So when he returned as a different character, it was like, oh, well, I'm healthier now. This is who he actually is. In my mind, he looked like this because he was an idealized version or whatever. And so they tried to play it off very well. And like, I guess it kind of worked, but in my mind, it was very jarring. And I was like, that's not Greg. And so for the rest of the show, I was just like, this isn't Greg. This is a character pretending to be Greg. I can't get around the fact that this is not Greg.
I mean, I prefer that swap to what they did on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where they just kind of did it with the mom,
right?
Yeah, and then just didn't mention it or didn't even hint towards it. It was just a low-key swap.
And like, I know they did it in Game of Thrones, like Dario I think he was only in like an episode in one season, and then the next season they brought him back and he was a completely different actor, and they didn't acknowledge it at all. So for like the first half of that episode until they named him, I was just like, who is this guy? Like, why is he here? Yeah, with
Game of Thrones, I mean, there's so many characters in Game of Thrones. That's a risky proposition. I would just think, oh, this is somebody new. But I think, so I agree with you, Techtic, that you have to acknowledge it. You can't, like, even if it's something as simple as, oh, did you get a haircut? Like, you have to do something. And like, my perspective on this is not, like, I can't think of any TV examples. You guys just named 2, but I couldn't think of any. Like, the example I always go to, like, as one of the bigger recastings I've ever witnessed, period, was Rhodey from the Iron Man from Iron Man 1.
Oh, that's
in Iron
right.
Man 1. It's
they
Terrence Howard.
pretended it didn't happen.
Well, no, see, they didn't. They kind of did, but if you remember in Iron Man 2, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is Tony Stark's at that hearing with the Senate guy, and they call Colonel Rhodes as a witness, and Tony goes back and like shakes his hand, and he's like, he kind of like gives him this look, and Don Cheadle says, "I'm here, it's me, get over it." So it's almost like the writing in a way was saying, okay, yeah, we know this is a different guy, but they did it the right way in that they first of all said his name and showed him, so okay, now it's a new actor. But they also kind of poked a little bit of fun at it. There's a fine line, I think, in terms of how much do you address it, and I think you have to, but you don't have to go that far.
I think the only correct way to address it with Batgirl is to kill her and Batwoman and have the role be refilled like it is many times with Robin, right? Because the Batman story arc is inherently dark, and the only way to really get away with something like that is not to be all tongue-in-cheek about it, is to just go down the rabbit hole.
And I mean, this isn't the first time that the CW Arrowverse has really had to do something like this. Like, I mean, the Black Canary, man, that character has had so many different actresses and so many different iterations that it's almost comical. Like, people have their own thoughts on the entire Black Canary story arc in Arrow, but like, man, you went from, I think there were 3 or 4 different iterations of the Black Canary, and now they have a spinoff with all of them in one show. So it's, I think if they do it well, I agree with Techtic.
Birds of a feather.
I think you just have to kind of like kill the character off and have her step down and return for an episode to like hand off the mantle for some reason and just have her disappear. Plus, the one nice thing that the Arrowverse does have going for it, and I don't know if we can still call it that with the Arrow being done, but it's still the Arrowverse in my mind. They've already explored the idea of all of the alternate universes. So they could very easily pivot and just be like, oh, this is alternate universe Batwoman now. It could be, it's doable. It's very strange though.
Well, with comic books, you have, in general, with that material, you have a lot more in the way of options. But it's, one thing I want to ask, because I agree, Techtic, I think your plan, quote unquote, is a good one. Kill her off screen, and just when season 2 starts, just say, oh, she died in some way. But my question is, do you bring in a new character to become Batwoman who somehow also knows all of the other existing supporting characters who presumably are still going to be on the show? Or do you wipe everything, start from scratch? Because I mean, again, I'm very movie motivated in this discussion, but think about how many times Spider-Man has been reiterated with a lot of the same characters, but they just, Toby's done. Okay, wipe the slate clean. Let's start another one.
I don't think you...
Can you take that approach with TV or not?
I don't think you wipe the slate clean. You can keep a lot of the same supporting roles that exist. I mean, you guys all know that I'm a big fan of the animated Batman movies that come out. And the best thing to happen to Batwoman is, and this is going to sound terrible, is to have her live the... what was it? I think it's the Killing Joke one, where instead of the Joker just horribly abusing her, he just full on kills her. I think that's the darkest way to do it. That opens the door for a new rivalry. Well, not a new rivalry, but like a new kind of segment that they can leverage.
Right.
And it's a tried and true storyline.
Yeah, you can set the stage then, and right away you have your villain, because I assume these sort of shows, I've never watched any of the CW shows, but I assume they have kind of season-long villain arcs.
Yeah, for the most part they do.
I never got through Daredevil, but like those comic book shows kind of do. So right away then you set the tone and set up the villain by saying, okay, this person killed Batwoman. So A, we need a new Batwoman, and it's going to be this person. And B, her first job is going to be...
And here's the other...
Take down this guy.
In that movie, that's how Batwoman went from Batwoman to the Oracle. You can even have her be the, quote, Oracle from that point, and she's just disfigured. I think cast a new Batwoman.
Or just have her be in the shadows and have someone just be like a voiceover. You know what I mean? Just be like, right. Oh, now we have an Oracle. It's
going to be curious to see, how this is addressed, because as we've clearly shown, there's a number of ways to go about it. But I think what we can agree on is they can't just not address it. That's not really an option. And at this point, given what film and television is, you just have to be more creative than that. And thinking about the War Machine example, like with the Incredible Hulk, they didn't acknowledge that at all, did they? I think Edward Norton had one movie, and then in Avengers, Mark Ruffalo just kind of showed up. And
yeah, I don't know. Was the Edward Norton movie even technically part of the canon, or was that its own separate thing?
The Edward Norton movie is part of the MCU. It's part of canon. It introduces General Ross, for example, is introduced in the Incredible Hulk. So it's definitely a part of canon. But I don't know. It's that one's more interesting because there was never an Incredible Hulk 2. So there wasn't much of a storyline closely tied to the character himself. So when he shows up in Avengers, and he's also a very well-known character. It's not like Colonel Rhodes, where you don't really know exactly who he is. It's the Incredible Hulk. Everyone knows the basic story of the Incredible Hulk. So right. Mark Ruffalo can just show up and say, "I'm the Hulk," and you're like, "Yeah, okay." And so it's a different situation for sure, but they made a choice to not even acknowledge it. So I guess there might be a universe in which you could get away with doing that, but in terms of television shows where you have a much stronger sense of continuity, I don't think you can get away with that.
This also kind of leads me to wonder, what is the status of the Arrowverse and the slate of CW DC shows? Because, we all know the Arrow just ended. That was the thing that started the entire world of CW DC off. Then you have The Flash, which, I think they're on their 7th or 8th season at this point, maybe even more. I don't really know. I haven't kept up with the show in a while. But eventually you would think those actors might start to want to move on. And then you have the Legends of Tomorrow, and I know that is kind of bleeding actors. I know a few of them just left. I know Supergirl, I think, is still going strong. And then they just added basically Batwoman and, oh no, there's another one. Stargirl, I think. And I don't know, we're starting to get into, not that Batwoman's not a mainstream character, but you're starting to get into tertiary characters here. And a lot of the main shows that were the tent poles of this universe are kind of starting to fade away or get older where they might fade away soon. I just wonder how long the CW DC universe is going to continue, especially with something like this. This is going to be a major continuity shift, whatever they do. It doesn't bode well for your series when your titular character is being replaced in season 2. It just doesn't. Well, I don't care how well it did in season 1. It's just going to be super jarring. And I'm sure there were a lot of people who showed up just because they like Ruby Rose.
And interestingly enough, it puts them in a situation that's similar to the MCU, in which we're in a transitional period. And it remains to be seen, thanks to COVID-19, how that's going to be handled exactly. But, even take the Marvel shows that were on Netflix. I'm pretty sure all of them are canceled now, right? I think they just at a certain point decided, okay, these are done. And it was a rare decision on their part. So yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, this DC. I've never watched a single show in the Arrowverse, but it's been churning now for a few years at least, and it's quite popular. So it's a fair question, and this is just kind of another link in that chain of, okay, these for being these large superhero properties, this is just the latest evidence that they can be fairly fragile, and how they respond to this is going to be interesting. So we shall see. So right now, we are going to take a short break before we talk about Ghost of Tsushima. But before we do, I want to shout out our fantastic Patreon producer, Mr. Ben Checkness. Ben's been supporting us for a while. You've heard his name on the podcast if you've listened before. He gets a shout out every episode thanks to his role as a producer on the show. So how did Ben become a producer on the show, you might ask? Well, he supported us on Patreon. So if you head to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast, you can see some of the details about how you can become more like Ben. So as a producer, Ben supports us at the night level, and he gets access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, of course, in addition to this producer shout out, input into our weekly game segment, and he will also be guesting, hint, hint, extremely soon. And he gets that opportunity every once in a while, so you can get that opportunity as well. And we would love your support. If you aren't quite in the position to support us at the night level, we would also love your support at the Squire level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment and vlog. Or there's also the page level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. So again, the details are at patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Go check it out. Be like Ben. We will take a short break and we'll be right back to talk about Ghost of Tsushima.
I'm Harrison.
I'm Jordan.
Well, I'm Harrison.
I'm fucking Jordan.
All right! And we're the Greedfall Podcast. Let us be your unnatural Sherpa guides on this existential plane of mountainous game and movie exploration.
And don't forget about that spookiness that lives within us all, but mainly in you, you spooky bitch.
How dare I'm offended.
We've been voted the best podcast to listen to by many.
By many, that means a few. That's more than one.
Results may vary. We'll see you on the next episode of Grief
Burrito, yeah!
Yes!
Okay, welcome back. So this past week, I believe it looks like May 14th, according to this YouTube video, in the latest kind of state of play event from PlayStation, we got an extended look at the gameplay for Ghost of Tsushima. And by extended, what I mean is it's like 19 minutes worth of gameplay. So there's a lot to kind of dissect here. You know, we talked about Ghost of Tsushima a while back. For those that don't know, you know, it looks... And there's kind of a common thread in a lot of the YouTube comments, which I know reading YouTube comments is a dangerous exercise, but a lot of people are referring to it as, you know, Assassin's Creed Japan, or like the Assassin's Creed that Ubisoft didn't get to make before Sony jumped on it, essentially. And you know, watching the gameplay, it does play like that in a lot of ways. So
especially if you play as Ghost.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about that specifically because, you know, they showed a couple of different ways you can play as this character. I think it's Jin is the character that you play as, and you can play as essentially Jin the Samurai. I think these are the two that they mentioned, but there might have been more. Jin the Samurai or Jin the Ghost. And it's interesting that they never use the word ninja throughout any of it. But essentially, if you play as Jin the Ghost, you are a ninja. And they go out of the way to characterize it as dishonorable relative to the samurai being honorable, which I also think is interesting. But in any case, let's start from the top. You know, generally, what did you guys think of this?
I mean, obviously the game itself looked beautiful in this. So like what really usually sells me on a game is the story, because like you said, this did look a lot like an Assassin's Creed game just from the gameplay. And so the gameplay looked very Assassin's Creedy. I mean, I don't really know how much I can really say about it. It didn't seem like you necessarily, obviously we saw short snippets of the gameplay and the different styles, and it didn't necessarily seem like there was a lot of motivation behind what you were doing, but obviously it was very truncated footage. So for me, this didn't really sway me in whether or not I wanted to get the game. I thought the visuals were beautiful. The combat looked kind of interesting, but it also looked a little bit easy. I know Techtic wants to talk about that a little bit. But, I mean, obviously we're not really seeing the controls and what you have to do to defeat your enemies, but it didn't really seem like it was super difficult. And for me, I don't know, this just seems like another open world game, and there's so many of those out there, and I don't know if this is something that I necessarily want to play. The setting looks super interesting. I hope the story is compelling. I think that would be the thing that brings me in. There are those little foxes. I thought
I knew you were going to mention the foxes. I knew that was the one thing you were going to hone in on. But like, continue.
I swear to God, I thought that he was going to like kill the fox, and I was super heartbroken. I was like, no, why would you kill the little fox?
And then you see him pat the fox on the head, and you're like, yes.
And I don't know if you guys follow the Twitter account, Can You Pet the Dog? But like the thing that I immediately thought was, yes, you can pet the fox, and I will pet all of the foxes. So if there's a big like relationship between Jin and the fox, like I might play just to see where that goes, because I like foxes. It was cute.
But I'm glad you mentioned, and I know, Techtic, you're going to talk about the combat, but there were certain things about it. So first of all, the I shouldn't say the differentiation between playing in Samurai mode and Ghost mode isn't clear, because it is, but they also kind of end the same way. Like, in Ghost mode, he still winds up drawing his sword and, like, fighting these guys much in the way that a Samurai would. That's point one. Point two, I think, is what Techtic is going to say. And Techtic, are you going to touch on the first few moments in Samurai mode, because this was something that really irked me a little bit?
I'm going to touch on a lot of things.
Okay, why don't you? I'll give you the floor, and I'll come in later, because I think we're going to overlap on a few things. But go ahead.
So first and foremost, before I get into the combat, I'm going to go in chronological order of the video. I love playing open world games. I find myself just doing ridiculous tasks that I just defined for myself as a means to exploring the world. The fact that even the wind interacts with you to give you waypoints, I find incredibly breathtaking. On top of that, you have various animals and creatures and smokestacks kind of luring you to different points, and then you could pet the fox. I mean, I'm so glad Nerdbomber mentioned that because that was super awesome, and I was very excited about that feature. Now, that said, going on to the combat side of it, the fight styles were incredibly different, and the samurai specifically, it seemed like it was almost like quick time events where you're just sitting there as opposed to like fighting and just kind of button mashing. You're more just, okay, watch the guy with the arrow, hit, watch the guy with the sword, hit, watch the guy with the arrow again, hit. And that would stress me out. I am not about samurai style. I am more about ghost style.
It's not about stress. It's like they keyed up this first, you walk up as a samurai and you face off with this guy and you both draw your swords in this big moment, and then, oh, no, you apparently hit the right button at the right time and you just cut him in half, basically, and he just dies. And it's like, yeah, I get that's probably how it was, but like, come on, let's get some clinking going on and like
exactly.
a sword fight of some kind. And like, yeah, then he's walking around blocking the arrows with the sword, and it's like, I get that that's a thing, but like,
and he wasn't even prone when he was doing it. He was just standing straight up, like just going, hey, get out of here, arrow. But going to the ghost part, I disagree with you that the ghost is like the samurai when he is in face-to-face combat, simply because he's using other things like throwing stars and smoke grenades to always throw them off, and he's never really confronting them, quote, honorably. It's never sword-to-sword contact potential. It's always, well, I'm going to stab you, but I'm also going to do this, for lack of a better term, tricky dick stuff to to throw you off.
Right, and he's there's more climbing, like he's climbing around and like climbing on that boat and stuff, and it was super cool. Like if it were me, I would definitely play in ghost mode. It looked way more fun. I have to disagree with you, Nerdbomber, in that again reading the YouTube comments, and granted they're going to be just filled with salt, but like I did not graphically. I was like, this is not that impressive, and like there were times when I was like, this isn't done yet. Like the guys getting hit with arrows animations were comical almost. Like it was
like a gunshot.
They would fly off their feet. Like and there was a lot of good ones. Like whenever anyone got slashed with a sword, it was kind of funny, but because it was like the only animation they had. But it was like they would stand there for a second and just like clearly dying, and then just like flop over on the ground. So that was funny. But yeah, there were parts of it looked good, but there were also parts of it where I was like, these textures are not what they should be.
Needed more triangles for sure.
They needed more triangles.
That is fair. I wasn't really looking at the combat animation. Like I was definitely wooed over by like the sweeping landscape views and
the environments.
Yeah, that really looked good to me. But it is kind of jarring now that you mention it. Yeah, they did look like they were getting shot by a gun or like a shotgun,
like flying backward. Yeah, it's insane. I think my favorite part of the entire 18 minutes, 19 minutes, whatever it was, when. I mean, anyone who's been listening to this podcast for more than a couple episodes, or even for one episode probably, knows that I love movies more than like most things in my life. And granted, I haven't watched many old-timey samurai movies, but when they mentioned the like samurai cinema mode where you can just go black and white, I was like, that is the coolest thing ever. I don't know why. Just like I was like, that is so cool. Because like you see all these old movies like Seven Samurai and stuff that like they're very... That's like part of it almost, is like it's grainy, it's black and white, and like it's just these. It feels like it's more befitting of the environment you're in and the time you're in almost. That it just, to me, that elevated it just a little bit. I still don't know if it's for me, but I
thought that was interesting, but at the same time, like it's kind of a gimmick, and how often are you really going to use it? Like probably a battle or two, you might be like, oh, let's activate this mode. Let's make it seem like we're in a samurai film. But then like after the second or third encounter, do you really care?
I could see myself playing the entire game like that, honestly.
Really?
Just because it would be unique. It would be interesting.
That's true.
I mean, I don't know. Like I think, and where I was going was, I don't think I'm going to buy this game. Like this gameplay demo didn't do enough for me to put me in like a take my money mode. It looked fine. It looked cool. I don't know if it's for me. I mean, I ran out of steam on the Assassin's Creed games. This looks very, and as much as it is open world, it looks kind of mission based in a way that I don't think I would get a lot out of, if that makes sense. And also like customization doesn't mean anything to me, and they harped on that a lot, and it's not really my thing. So.
See, I too ran out of steam on the Assassin's Creed games, but it was more because the story was just too long and convoluted, and I just ain't nobody got time for that. Whereas this is just hey, we're starting from point zero. Here's your chance to get in and come for a ride. And I'm for it.
Yeah, I will say, I think
in that sense, it is point zero. It's a good point. Is like, yeah, you're starting at the beginning of something. It could be a much more self-contained thing.
Yeah, if
That's
there's a
point.
good story here, then I might be more compelled to play it. Like I said before, like the gameplay loop, I feel like at this point, there's really not a good gameplay loop that's super original or unique. I feel like for the most part, for many games, it's all kind of deviations on the same thing. There's nothing that's really been truly groundbreaking in the last few years. So unless the story is super captivating, then it's just going to be more of the same old. And I think that for people like you and me, Illeagle, we didn't benefit from this preview at all because the gameplay, it's going to be good. It's a Sucker Punch game. It's Sony funded. Right. I mean, for the most part, I feel like most of the Sony first-person titles have been pretty tight in terms of gameplay. Maybe Death Stranding, I didn't actually play it, but I heard bad things. So maybe that excluded. But for the most part, you can expect a quality gameplay experience. But for me, like, I need to find a compelling story to get me to play that gameplay loop. Otherwise, I might as well just go back to an old game I already have.
Sure. And like, it's worth noting, like, the whole samurai milieu, like, that has a lot of appeal for me. Like, The Last Samurai is kind of a goofy movie if you haven't seen it, but I love it so much. It's like, and when I was watching this, I was thinking about that a lot. It's like, oh man, it's like you're in The Last Samurai, and you're not, because like that movie was ridiculous. But the soundtrack was great. I will say that was another thing that I actually wrote down while watching this. Was there were parts of the soundtrack I was like, this is a legit, real deal soundtrack. Which
Can I just say,
just one piece
super
of immersion.
Enjoy that you take notes when you watch the trailers. I should start doing that.
I want to make sure that when I show up to these things, I'm not just, I don't have nothing to say. And it turns out most of the time it's the opposite. I have too much to say, but just, to be safe. I'm a note taker in general. But yeah, so if you haven't watched this demo, go watch it. It's whether or not you think you'll wind up playing it, it's an interesting watch. Ghost of Tsushima, I actually don't know when it's coming out. I want to say July. I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, I think it was sometime in July. I also
June
know
or July,
that
but it's also July 17th is when it's supposed to come out. Sorry.
Okay. I know that's also not how you pronounce the title, but that's how I've been saying it. But I've been corrected, apparently. I don't know. I can't physically make myself pronounce it the correct way, so I can't even correct you because that's the way I've been saying it, and someone corrected me, and I was like, oh, well, I'm going to keep on saying it the way that I've been saying it.
Is it Tsushima? Well, no, you would be able to say that.
I think it is, but I just mentally, I have a mental block where I can't say it. I don't know why.
I've said it wrong enough times now where if anyone was offended, they would have already turned this off. So I'm not even talking to them anymore.
Hopefully in the sequel, it'll be Ghost of Someplace Else.
Right. So yeah, July 17th, 2020. Feel free to check it out. It might be your thing. It might not. That's the joy of video games. Speaking of the joy of video games, I am going to hijack the first update in What Are You Up To Wednesday. I finished Luigi's Mansion, and Nerdbomber and Techtic both know this because we have a group chat, and I was complaining to them about how hard it was to find some of those freaking gems. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter to talk to me about the gems and how hard they were to find, or how easy they were if you're a lot smarter than I am. I did find all of them, and I did beat the game. My rub with it is, maybe it's a more rub with myself, is I spent a lot of coins on gem finders. So by the end of the game, there's 3 potential game endings for Luigi's Mansion. Well, the actual endings are all the same. The endings are all the same, but at the end, kind of spoiler alert, but there's not really any substance to it. At the end, you build a new hotel for the ghosts, is the whole shtick. And how big the hotel at the end winds up being that you build is based on how much money you have at the end of the game. So for me,
I literally had no idea.
Yeah, we didn't spend a dime on our. We must have had the biggest hotel.
You must have had the biggest hotel. I think you needed over $70,000 or something, and that's easy to get if you're not spending any of it.
Us.
So for me, I spent a lot of money on I bought all the boo finders, all the jobs. Why not? I have no reason to not do it. So I got a grade, and they give you a grade too. So I'm sure you guys got a grade A, which gets you the biggest hotel. Grade B obviously gets you the second biggest. I got grade C, which gets you this little 1-story Motel 6 kind of deal. But if I had known that, I would have tried to find the gems without the gem finders. Now, granted, I wouldn't have succeeded because I can tell you right now, there were some of those gems that if I didn't have gem finders, I never would have found them. But that was an interesting thing, I guess, with my ending experience of that game. I also had a really hard time with the final boss, but I did beat it.
Did you co-op any of the game?
Nope, not a single part.
See, we found the difficulty didn't really change whether you had 1 people or 2 people shooting. So co-op definitely made it a much more beatable game.
Okay, so you're saying it was easier. You kind of just said 2 things that were opposite.
I think what he means is like the enemies didn't get any harder if you played with 2 people.
Words sometimes good.
So yeah, I didn't, and I will say like you get, and I don't want to spoil anything, but like the last boss in that game, the general difficulty curve of that game is most of the time you're walking around, you could be playing the game with 1 hand and you'll be fine. It's super, super easy. Then you get to like a floor boss, and like those are still not that hard, but like I did die on a couple of them because I couldn't figure out. Every boss in that game is based on like you find out the one thing that you need to do to kill them, and then once you figure that one thing out, you're golden. You just have to do it. And there were a couple times where I died because I couldn't figure out what that thing was, and I would eventually figure it out. The final boss of the game, man, I don't know about you guys, but I found that to be very challenging. Like I think it only took me like 5 or 6 times to beat, but I feel like that 6th time where I did beat it, I got lucky. I guess that's where I'll leave it. Right now, I moved on to Starlink, Battle for Atlas, and I'm having a really good time with that so far. Actually, I've only played it for like an hour or 2, but
you get to customize your ship a lot in that game, right? Yes.
And granted, I don't have like, that's the one that comes with like the plastic pieces. I don't have any of that. It's all digital because you can play it that way. But yeah, there's a lot of ship customization. It's open world with multiple worlds, which is pretty cool. Like you can literally explore an entire planet and then go to the next one. So I'm a completionist gamer, so I'm going to take a long time to beat it, but that's just fine with me. It's ship combat, it's not revolutionary ship combat necessarily, but it's, if you're into that sort of thing, and I haven't done it for a while, but I found after revisiting it that, yeah, I still like it a lot. So I'm into it. I would actually, a comparison I would draw, even though it's not like an MMO or anything, there's really no online multiplayer element, is that it's kind of like Destiny a little bit, because in Destiny, you can spend a lot of time just kind of bombing around specific planets and doing side quests, essentially. And this has kind of that same flavor, as there is a main campaign, but there's a lot of like little things you can go get for this person, and he'll give you a reward at the end, some upgrade. So I'll be spending a lot of time in it, and I'm really enjoying it. Techtic, why don't you keep us rolling here?
Okay, so I'm particularly excited about this What You Doing Wednesday. I have officially started construction and design of the wizard staff that I said I was going to craft. I did not, however, take the route of using an animal skull, simply because I can't really find one.
How long ago did you? This was a while ago that you mentioned that you were going to do this.
Yeah.
So,
and what better time than under quarantine with stuff around the house and seeing what you can craft. So by all means, folks, sharpen your crafting tools, get creative, and see what you can make with stuff around the house. So hopefully I continue to work at it, and it will probably be my next video vlog.
Exciting. Keep on keeping on, my friend. I think I speak for all of us when I say we're looking forward to what you come up with. Nerdbomber, finish us off.
Okay, so I have 2 things that I kind of want to talk about. The first is that I started playing Greedfall. So I had posted on our Twitter and social media that we had bought a bunch of games that were on sale like probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I finally put down Animal Crossing. I think I'm officially done for now with the game. I've just kind of like, it's run its course in terms of the play pattern, needed something different. And so Greedfall is a sprawling RPG kind of in the vein of a Dragon Age type game. And it's a AA game, one of the few I feel like AA games that have come out this generation. I feel like things are either like AAA high production value titles or an indie game. And so this is one of the few like AA games. It's a studio, I think, based in France. And essentially, it looks almost like a game from last generation. And it kind of plays a little clanky and janky too in terms of like the character movement. And it took me a few hours to really get into the game. So basically the premise of the game, and I didn't realize that this was the underlying story when I bought it, was you come from a continent that's being overrun by the plague, a plague of some sort, which is ironic.
Jeez.
And so you're sent as an emissary to a new island to kind of habitate it, colonize it, and see if there's a potential cure to send back home because your mother is afflicted by the disease. So you basically start on a quest. You go on a boat, you sail the seas, and it's got magic in it. And it's not medieval per se. I would say it's like colonial era times. But there's also like swashbuckling, piratey things and magic.
17th century styled is what I'm reading on Wikipedia.
Yes, thank you.
Guides people. Yeah.
And so like a lot of the gameplay, it feels like an old school Dragon Age game. And I couldn't figure out, ironically, like there's a lot of stuff going on. I haven't played an in-depth RPG in a very long time. So like there's button binding and stuff in the game, and I couldn't figure out how to run. So for like the first 4 or 5 hours that I played the game, it was a very slow slog. And I was like, well, this is stupid. Like it takes me 15 minutes to get across town, and there's a bunch of fetch quests that I'm doing right now to build up my bond with my party members. Like this is stupid. And just as I was about to put it down, I happened to hit the A button and realized that that's how you run.
You didn't try the A button? Just try all the buttons.
I thought it would attack or something. I don't know. So eventually, now that I know how to run, I'm actually having a lot of fun with the game. Even though the graphics and the controls are kind of old school, it's nice to get back into that type of game. It's an escape, really like developing relationships with my characters. I'm trying to figure out which character I want to romance.
That is the most hilarious thing to listen to. I'll walk in the room and she'll go, I can't figure out who to sleep with.
I can't figure out who to romance. She used the term romance, which I think is even funnier. Who do I romance?
Well, that's what they call it. And I mean, if you make the wrong decision, so right now there's a sea captain who's in my party, and like he's kind of mysterious, but his face is all kind of like weird looking because he has a bunch of face tattoos, and I'm just like not really into that. But he's this like young, capable seafaring captain. And then my other option is my old master of arms from growing up. He's apparently like 15 to 20 years older than I am, which nothing wrong with age discrepancies. But he always talks about how he knew me when I was a little child, and that just is like kind of creepy.
Does he lick his lips when he says that?
No, but it's just like I get weird vibes even though he's nice. And so like I'm leaning towards the face tattoo seafaring captain. Unclear at this moment.
I let him master my arms, if you know what I'm saying.
So
pretty good.
Basically, it's a very Dragon Age-esque game, and for a AA game, I think like the world is actually very well done. The story so far seems pretty interesting, so I guess I'll keep you guys posted. But I think this is going to be like a big 40 to 50 hour adventure. So
it's actually interesting. I'm on the Wikipedia page, and under plot, there's a message from Wikipedia that says this article's plot summary may be too long or excessively detailed. I've never seen that before, but someone really poured their blood, sweat, and tears into this Wikipedia plot summary. I'm not going to read it, but I just wanted to make that note.
I feel like it's one of those games that kind of flew under the radar a little bit, and in like 5 or 6 years, people will look back and there will be this weird little cult following of people who were obsessed with it. I can definitely see that happening.
It seems to have like fairly positive reviews, somewhat mixed. It's either way, it sounds way too heavy for me, but that's kind of a known at this point.
And then the other thing that I wanted to mention is that we are still in the throes of our Chuck rewatch, and we're halfway through the 3rd season, and I'm already like kind of upset because I know we're nearing the end, and I don't know what I'm going to watch after. But
Avatar.
How many seasons is it?
There's 5 seasons. And
okay. You're like barely halfway through. You need to relax.
We've gone through 2.5 seasons in like a week and a half. So, and this is a show that I've watched probably like 5 times easily at this point, but it's still so good. And if anyone wants to tweet at me and talk Chuck, I feel like there's nobody who still wants to talk about the show, but I do. I could write like a freaking thesis on the show. I've analyzed it so much. And it's so good, and the soundtrack is amazing. If you don't even want to watch the show, listen to the soundtrack, because it's great. And
so
that is my thing.
It's a good time for. I realize this is the first episode in a while where we've gone this far, and I haven't even mentioned our Twitter handles. So we're all on social media. We're all on Twitter. I am at OW86. I am at OW Nerdbomber. We have at OW Techtic, and our main account at Online Warriors 1. So go hit us up to talk about Starlink or Chuck or wizard staffs, whatever you're in the mood for.
Who I should romance.
Who Nerdbomber should romance. Any of the topics from today, any of that. we're happy to hear from you. So with that, I think Nerdbomber has a quiz for Techtic and I today.
I do. So this quiz is very topically appropriate. It is samurai movie trivia.
Ooh.
Except instead of trivia, I'm going to do more of a lie detector style to this type of quiz topic this week.
I feel it. We haven't done that in a while, and I'm for it.
I want to mix it up, and there are a lot of funky titles for samurai-style movies, so I figured this would be a fun way to shake things up. So I'll kind of start. We'll have Illeagle go first, and then we can swap who goes back and forth with saying whether these titles are real or fake. So the first one is Fate of the Final Son.
The Final Son? Oh, that's made up. That's you. That's got you written all over it.
So I think Illeagle busted, so I'm going to say true.
So Illeagle is right. I totally made this one up.
This guy has you written all over it. I don't know what it was about it, but the second I heard it, I was like, there's no way. All right. Sweet. Early lead. I did not bust. That's good.
No busting yet. Okay. So the second one is Revenge of a Kabuki Actor.
Can you use it in a sentence?
This movie is called Revenge of a Kabuki Actor.
Pretty good sentence.
That's true because I don't think you can make that up.
I agree. It's real.
Okay, so that one is real, so you both get a point here. This was a movie released in 1971 where a kabuki actor exacts a bloody revenge after he encounters the wealthy businessman who destroyed his family.
Wow. Sounds intense.
Okay, so the score is 2-1 with Illeagle in the lead. This next title is Honor of the Wind.
Honor of the Wind. That sounds fake, but I'm going to say true. It's too true. It rings too true. I'm saying
Concur. I also think it's true.
Illeagle, you should have gone with your gut. You guys are both wrong. I made that one up, but it would be a great samurai title.
Honestly, I kind of want to steal that and write a samurai movie.
Please do. Honor of the Wind.
We just talked about the wind guiding you.
Where do you think I got it from?
Oh gosh, she's stealing from Ghost of the name I can't say.
All right. So
Voldemort?
Yeah, he who must not be.
Okay, so it's still 2-1 with Illeagle in the lead. This next title is called After the Rain.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm gonna say true as well. I feel bad just following Techtic, but it's true. That one's real.
All right, so you both got that one right. This was a movie released in 1999. Other fighters become jealous after a wandering samurai secures a position as their lord's fencing master.
Yeah, and it all happens after the rain.
Okay, so now it's 3-2. Illeagle still in the lead. I have 3 of these left. I don't have any good backups for a tiebreaker, so make sure we don't end in a tie. Okay,
right, it's tight.
So this next one is called Samurai Wolf.
Samurai Wolf. This is fake.
I think that one is also true.
All right, so Techtic has caught up.
Oh gosh, dang it!
This was a movie released in 1966. A charismatic Ronin gets snared into a conflict between officials at a way station and gains the enmity of a group of thugs.
Classic Ronin.
Yeah, but who's the wolf? Is there a wolf involved?
I think maybe he's the
fox,
wolf or
really?
channeling the wolf. I don't.
Oh, he's a samurai. God, whatever. Forget it. Gosh darn it. All right, that's fine. There's 2 left. I
Okay.
can do this.
So this next one is called Dance of the Samurai.
Am I going first?
I think it's you. Yeah.
That is false.
All right,
Yeah.
Illeagle, what do you think?
I know this kind of puts me in the corner for the next question, the last question, but I have to agree with Techtic. This is false.
Okay, you guys are too good. You got your lie detectors finely tuned. That one I did make up.
I don't think
Okay,
any
so-
samurai movie ever just goes, hey, this is a samurai movie.
I mean, you had Samurai Wolf.
Samurai Wolf, yeah.
There was like a movie called
Yeah,
The
but
Seven
Samurai Wolf had a
Samurais.
big awoo in it.
Seven Samurai is like one of the most popular and like well-known ones.
Yeah,
So,
there's
they do. They
there's
put it
a
in the
decent
title.
amount of samurai movies with samurai in the title.
Okay, so we're in the last question now, and we're tied.
This is the
so-
last one.
So why don't we do this? Because I don't want, like, it kind of puts Techtic in a box where he has to say the opposite of whatever I say. So why don't we say our answers at the same time to try and like iron out any follow-up?
No, I'm fine of doing the opposite of whatever you say.
I mean, I can just count it down and do 1, 2, 3, and then on the next beat, you guys would just say what you think.
All right, yeah, let's
It's up-
do that.
Let's do it that way.
So this last one is called Sword of the Beast.
Okay.
1,
I'm ready.
2, 3.
True. That's true.
Balls.
That's true. Okay. So perfect. We're dialed in.
All right, so Illeagle wins this one. This was a real
Yes.
movie. It was released in 1965, and it was set in 1857 at the end of the, and I'm going to butcher this, Tokugawa shogunate. The story follows a fugitive samurai who's killed a counselor in his clan to a mountain where he meets another samurai who is poaching gold.
You know, I totally
Techtic,
just said the opposite of what you said.
You never heard of the Sword of the Beast?
I did. I just
Come
said
on,
the
that's-
opposite of what you said. You didn't
Wait, this
hear
is
the
a well-known
delay?
movie?
I did hear. No, I was kidding. I've never heard of it.
Oh.
Regardless of how shrouded in controversy it is, I'll take the win. You said you're just going to say the opposite of whatever I said, no matter what, so I'm fine with it. Okay, so I will be preparing a quiz next week, and we, hint, may have more than 2 participants in that one, so be sure to tune in for that. We want to thank everyone for listening. We love doing this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed listening. If you did, or I guess even if you didn't, you can head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. We always appreciate that. And again, you can hit us up at our social media handles on Twitter, OWLegal86, at OW Nerdbomber, at OW Techtic, and at Online Warriors 1. We'd love to chat with you. In the meantime, have a fantastic week, and we will see you next week for our last show of the month of May.
Whoop, whoop.